knowing both of you for decades, actually. This is my first time having you in the same room. So when I listen to you, and it's eat all raw, which I love when I listen to you, then the next time I'm saying you have to cook your mushrooms and your beans. So the question I have every time is, how do I decide which to do? Because I go to all these doctors who treat, say, vegan, but different ways of doing it.
I think we're all saying the same thing. I don't think that Dr. Fuhrman would ever disagree that if you sprout it, it becomes a plant, you could eat it. But I do agree that if you took a bean the way I ate beans my whole life, cook them, you've got to break that fibrous structure down. So it's true. And by the way, occasionally I eat cooked beans. You know, I don't walk on water yet.
Right. I don't think we know that cooked beans products extend human lifespan, allow us to live 100 years old. They're excellent foods. I don't think you should be fearful of them.
Yeah.
In other words, we can eat cooked foods moderately. We still recommend a tremendous value to eating raw foods and eating a lot of raw foods each day. And I think that you're going to be super healthy, and it's a sustainable diet that you can live with for the rest of your life. You can stay with it consistently, you maintain a stable weight, you can maintain your muscle strength, you can be excited about your life, and leaves you an unbelievable amount of recipes that you can create that taste delicious and still sustain a sustainable diet that can be really fun and enjoyable your whole life.
But if you eat a lot of cooked beans, you may not have a lot of friends.
Anything that you can improve, going from American standard diet, anything you improve is going to get you healthier. Any little baby step that you take is great.
And I think I'll add one thing. I think that we need to remember that there's a sort of a spectrum of plant-based diets. At one end of the spectrum, you have the pure 100% raw food diet. At the other, the more conventional vegan diet that includes cooked and processed foods and all sorts of things. And at the one end, so completely raw vegan diet, this is a potentially highly therapeutic diet. It's very clean. There are no processed foods included. But the risk of some nutritional deficiencies will be a little bit higher because you're not including some of the foods that may have added nutrients and so forth. At the other end, your risk of having a potentially a diet that can contribute to disease is a little bit higher. And so where you fit on the spectrum depends on a number of things. What your state of health is, what your age is, what your physical activity is like. And so for young children, for example, including more of the foods that will fill their stomach with less volume can be very valuable in helping to ensure that they grow and develop properly. For someone with serious disease, you want to get closer to eating a really clean diet. So for most really healthy people who are exercising and having a balance of foods where you're eating plenty of raw foods, but including the healthiest of cooked foods like the legumes and the mushrooms and perhaps some grains, where you're not exposing them to really high temperatures, cooking them in healthy ways, that can be an excellent diet for long-term health maintenance. So I think we just need to remember that it really depends on individual factors, what diet will best suit you and your family at whatever stage you're at.
Well, I think the first thing I ever heard Brenda say that I disagree with is that this end of the diet, there's possibilities of things that lack. I would disagree with that. I think that we have the least possibility of lacking anything on a Hippocrates type of diet. Now, what I do agree is, by the way, we tell people who are well, they can eat cooked food. And by the way, the same cooked foods that you're talking about, I eat cooked food, Anna Marie eats cooked food, and but when you're fighting cancer, when you're fighting some catastrophic disease, our 62 years of experience and clinical research on people show that that's what it requires. And frankly, it may not require 100% of the people to do that. You have somebody sitting in front of you that had stage 4 cancer. Sloan gave him up to die. He had colitis his entire life. He's from here. He's from Long Island. He got completely well because he was 100% raw. Now, there are some people within that group, and we don't know who these people are, nor am I going to experiment, that may have been okay and may have been perfectly fine if they ate a 70% raw food diet. But what we've seen and what we know from what we've watched now since 1956 is when you're 100%, the likelihood you're going to get well from these dramatically increase. Does everyone get well? No, not everyone gets well, because there's psychological factors, there's a million other factors.
And let me qualify the statement. So what I'm basing it on is the studies that have compared raw food vegans versus other vegans. And for example, B12 status, it tends to be, at least from the studies that I've seen, the lowest in the raw vegans.
The opposite is true.
Oh no, absolutely.
Okay.
I'll show you dozens of studies. The lowest levels, and I'll just pull them out. I've got them listed in my book.
Okay.
But raw vegans, because, and maybe not those that are following your program,
Exactly.
but often they just ignore B12.
Okay,
And so they're not including something, whereas a person eating a conventional vegan diet, for example, in the Adventist Health Study 2, what we see in the Adventists is their B12 status is excellent, whereas the people in Europe, the vegans, their B12 status is much lower because they don't eat as many B12 fortified foods. And so in the raw community, because they're not consuming the fortified foods, we see iodine being a problem in some, we see B12 and vitamin D, whereas in people that consume these fortified foods, we see higher levels when we look at the studies comparing these different populations. And that's not saying that you can't ensure adequate amounts of these things on a raw food diet. Absolutely you can, but just in general population studies, that's what we generally see.
Well, you've clarified. Let's explain it to you, that the raw food title encompasses many recreational food people. For instance, one of the hardest things I have to do as a leader in raw food is go to a raw food restaurant and act like I like to eat that food. I don't like to eat the food. It's nasty, it's loaded with sugar, it's mostly fruit, and why you have a B12 deficiency in that group is because unripened fruit will rape the body of any B vitamins, and certainly the bacteria B12. On the other hand, iodine deficiencies aren't a problem with us because algae is part of the program. Okay. On the other hand, when you look at B12, look at the Dr. Fontana study. And this should be really the most relevant thing to this conversation. Why we have less B12 deficiencies than vegans, because vegans cook their food. When you cook a bacteria, B12 is not a B vitamin. It's a soil-based microorganism. We don't cook our food. I cook some, but 70-80% of my diet, 85% is, we get that bacteria. So look at the Fontana study, Washington University, but they looked at us. They didn't look at people eating high fruit diets, recreational diets, and most vegans, as you pointed out earlier, they're eating recreational diets. My original vegan diet, so I had no money, was I get 5 loaves of white bread, this is not a joke, for $1. I got pretzels for 19 cents, and I forget what it cost. That horrible yellow color mustard for 12 cents a bottle. And I'd put mustard, I'd put pretzels, and I had pretzel sandwiches. Now, what a vegan diet was to me is don't eat meat and don't eat dairy food. Now, if I continued on that, I wouldn't be here today.
Look, I just want to clarify a couple things that people take, are cautious.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't think that's the main issue, which diet has more B12 or not anyway, because we have to make sure nobody's deficient in B12.
Take B12.
So either take B12, take your blood test, make sure you're not deficient in B12. We're all a little different. We all utilize B12 differently. And whether you have fortified foods or not, I don't eat any fortified foods, but I'm going to make sure I take enough B12. And the other issue, sure, is a lot of raw foodists are on fruitarian raw food diets, and I've taken care of this population for many, many years and seen them lose their hair and lose their teeth and their nails get weak and they're increased risk of infection, diet, and have pneumonias and things like that due to poor immune system function on an all-fruit diet. And also, I want to just mention that the inclusion of some cooked foods in the diet increased your defenses against cancer. And I've got patients who've recovered from cancer, and just like we talked about, for example, using cooked mushrooms in the diet. The lack of that mushrooms have tremendous power against cancer, and you have to eat them. You should eat them cooked. Oh, you're bringing pizza for us?
That's what we need. Glog up our head.
Vegan pizza? I don't eat cooked flour product. I don't eat pizza. I don't eat vegan pizza junk food.
Remember, a lot of these people
Okay.
in first base. That would have been the best food I ate at one point.
Is that, that's, anyway, but the point is that a vegan diet has the potential to be deficient in certain nutrients, and it's your responsibility to make sure that you're not deficient in anything. Don't rely on your nutritional guru to take care of you. It's your responsibility to make sure you're covered and getting all the nutrients you need. And those nutrients that are somewhat marginal based on how you eat and what you eat could be vitamin D and B12 and DHA and iodine and zinc and maybe K2. Those are maybe the marginal nutrients that are not high on a vegan diet. But it's your responsibility to know that and to make sure, particularly vitamin D, B12, and DHA are the nutrients that most vegans will develop problems with. And I've taken care of this vegan community for decades and see people develop problems on a vegan diet because of these, mostly because of fatty acid deficiencies and DHA deficiencies on a vegan diet.
So let's preface this when we say you've got to be cautious on the vegan diet. You've got to be much more cautious on the American diet, on the macrobiotic diet. I mean,
True.
We're just giving the science that we see on this.
And one way to test it is called spectra cell test, and that is actually a nutrition deficiency test. And you'd be amazed how many meat eaters are lacking B12, thinking that they actually have it. We've tested a lot of live food vegans with no deficiency, but as a rule, we put everybody on B12.
Yeah. That's the only supplement I'll tell you I want you all on.
Yeah.
So let me ask.
Spectra cell.
Some of your insurances pay for this. Just don't let the average holistic doctor interpret it, because they're going to tell you to eat salmon or something like this.
I've tried to use SpectraCell for years, and I tried to correlate it with regular blood tests to see if it was accurate, and I found it to be grossly inaccurate. And not to be, I couldn't rely on it consistently, because you get a B12 level on the SpectraCell versus one on the regular blood test, they wouldn't concur, a vitamin D level wouldn't concur, a B6 of thiamine wouldn't concur. I just felt it was not an accurate enough test for me to be dependent on its results.
But if you look at the Framingham people, they tell us that mainstream, we do both.
Right, you do both?
Everyone does B12. The mainstream blood test for B12 is not accurate.
Well, that's what we do in MMA.
Yeah, well,
But-
then it's different. Then we get to cost factors with this, yeah.
But still, I mean, you got to be careful. Because
So-
it comes up with people who are deficient or eating perfectly healthy sometimes. You can tell them they need more B1 or thiamine, and
It's
you know
true.
that's just not
It's
true.
true.
You know.